Hello again. It is Saturday, April 2nd, 2022 in the afternoon. My theme for the week, my 1 week adventure, as I call it, is states. It's 1 week adventure thing. I just choose like a phrase, it's sort of like a personal meme that just, the word or the phrase just like it kind of excites me, or it just seems like a rich theme. And then I'll just return to it throughout the week, and maybe come up with little projects or assignments that help me explore the theme. For instance, a little while ago, my adventure was called No Time, addressing the feeling like I have no time for anything. But I blocked off, for that week, I blocked off all the cameras in the living room and the kitchen so that I couldn't actually see what time it was, so that I wouldn't feel so like tied to the clock. Figure by not paying attention to the time, maybe I wouldn't feel so short on time. I think there's another experiment part of that too. Anyways, and it was good. And actually, I like that I could see doing that again at some point. Although I have since revealed the clocks. And anyways, my next theme is states. And I'd like loops. I think maybe I'll do loops afterwards. But states, states, sort of like a state of mind, state of being, thinking about different states of being. Like, say, one state of being is just sort of being present and attuned to just your like physical environment, or the audio environment. I don't know. Another state's just like conversation mode. Another state would be kind of being lost in thought, like ruminate, being in a rumination type of state. Being state of just being, kind of connected and engaging with another being. Different states. And yeah, there's certain states where I'd like to be able to shift just sort of more freely, or maybe with more agency, sort of shift from one state to another a bit easier. I already do, not easily, but I feel like there's all kinds of different states of mind that I'll go throughout the day. Particularly with also, having the state of like answering emails and doing work for my business. Like that's a particular state of mind. And yeah, this is very, very rambly. But I would like to be able to say, okay, now I'm going to enter into this state, or okay, now this is, the opportune state to be in is to, the idea of just sort of being present or using one's five senses, or this is a great time, or this is a great time to get lost in thought, or to get lost posting things on Twitter. It's just intention. Part of it is just sort of intention. Sometimes having this intention, like, okay, this is the state of mind I want to be in. This is what seems healthy or right or good. Intention on the one hand, and then opportunity, opportune. Like, hey, this maybe, if you think of all the different states, this is a good one for right now. So recognizing opportunity, being able to direct or steer oneself with intention. Okay, bring my hands down now. So maybe one project that I could do this week, something concrete, would be to just in terms of my own kind of personal states, brainstorm them and document them and come up with a nice long list of my states of being, and I could even try to log or think about throughout the day now which ones I go through and what times. Logging. I have a hard time logging things, but as I could. I could try it. But yeah, just sort of brainstorming and coming up with that long list. And then maybe doing a little bit of work about like, okay, thinking about, what's the state that I do want to be in when I'm like driving the car from here to there, or it's after 9 o'clock and the girls are asleep. What are my options for what state I could be in at that time? Or part of it is, now I'm starting to get into that kind of optimizing, thinking about times or blocks of the day. It can become kind of a time management thing. That's one application of thinking about states. I guess another application is just in terms of my own self, looking to kind of self-satisfying personal philosophy / internet philosophizing development. Maybe if I have a nice long list of possible states, I could come up with my own kind of state or sort of state loops. I was talking about OODA loops the other day. Maybe I can identify, different kind of 4 stages, loop. Or, people talk about like there's the 7 stages of grief. So those stages are different states of mind or states of feeling. It's more, not just mind, it's like an embodied state in the process of grief. Maybe I can come up with my own kind of linear, identify my own little linear progressions. I had this moment of real inspiration the other day. I was drawing a triangle, my sort of triangle of triad of the elements of currency, because it's also more kind of, maybe it's colloquial expression of Landry's immanent metaphysics. So there's this triad currencies, whether it's money currency or the current moment or electrical current or whatever, just that, sort of that, the flow of energy from one entity or being to another. 3 items on the triad are, the immanent, which is like vibes. Second is lore, so that's the transcendent, this sort of the stories or lore that helps sort of organize the self and the collective. And then the third came up with was the rules. Rules are the rules. The rules of the game. What sort of coded and I guess that's omniscient. Anyways, coming up with this triangle, I felt like, this was based on Jordan Hall identifying that he felt like there was some kind of a group of 3 having to do with sort of tokenomics that involved vibes and lore. And he's like, okay, what would be the term for the third one? Somebody said, I think like rule. And I thought, okay, maybe rules or the rule. And labeled the whole thing currency. Anyways, it felt very fun to create this little thing, and I'm like, no. And I was, hold on, I'm gonna pause. Anyways, it was exciting to come up with my own little abstraction, my own kind of abstraction little pattern. It's just a shape of some birds or concepts assigned to it. And I've always been drawn to those things, those types of, it's just words on a little diagram. I've always found them very appealing. I can think of the Cartman drama triangle. And I don't know, how much do they actually kind of help one live one's lives? I don't know. They just always seem helpful to me, even though right now I would have a hard time listing I'm thinking of what I have in mind. But I thought if I created my own little triangle that actually had some kind of other people found useful to apply, my own little concept. I guess I'm sort of a meme. Maybe I always thought like, oh my gosh, my life would feel complete to create create something that helps you kind of structure the meaning or significance of things. And I thought, well, just start trying. I mean, maybe it's, people say cringy to kind of come up with my own little diagrams and put them online. I mean, there's a part of me that maybe thinks it's cringy, and that's what would hold me back. But, in terms of logging your 10,000 hours, getting some practice in, I could start now. Come up with them, and maybe they're not great, but come up with them, post them online. Or not share them, but right now I'm feeling like just sort of sharing things, maybe even getting sort of a criticized or antagonistic response. That's sort of what then helps you kind of learn and iterate. That's that process of putting it out there, getting the response, even if it's negative or none, silent, the response of no, you get nobody responding. So just put it out there. And anyways, where was I going with all this? Anyways, states, by logging different states, this could become kind of little material or building blocks for coming up with my own abstractions and my own, creativity in this space. What else about states? Think of the United States of America. Yeah, the state. Do with the government, think of the state of the government. So I guess that it has been almost a sort of all-encompassing context that a public lives and exists within. And you can think of I think a state of mind is maybe that all-encompassing, the state, whatever internally sort of the state is that kind of all-encompassing thing, defining what is what is possible in terms of action with boundaries and rules of engagement and again, vibes and lore. Country is a state, or state, province, or anyways, that'd be another definition of state. And then I guess you can think about in water, and ice, and vapor. I guess you can think of different, in the material world, things being in different physical states. Same molecules, but different. Oh my gosh. Yeah, my chemistry is it's not there. So you can think of, life cycle. Caterpillar is one state. Chrysalid, butterfly. There's also to state something. A way of sort of speaking, writing, communicating. It would be like, let me state that to you. It's funny. This process of coming up with having this word and then just sort of running through the different associations, kind of doing one's own just inner little dictionary definition of the term. It feels like such a great little mental exercise. So off of your top of your head, just trying to define a word or concept, or really just focusing on the word and being oh yeah, look at that meaning to it. I mean, John Vervaeke seems to do this quite a bit in his lectures. He'll take the word understand. It's understand. It's what you stand on. Just bringing apart these words, and you're yes, the word understand. It's has to do with the ground that you walk on or stand on, and all of a sudden there's you get that little insight payoff, and then it feels like this is just one little. You could call it kind of a building block or a little element or a little this just becomes like a little tool. This is not the right word. A little ingredient for, sense making or your conceptual shape rotating. This all reminds me of just going back to the meaning crisis lectures. I want to set something ambitious for myself. I got up to lecture 33. I could just go back and start at the beginning and listen to all 50. Is that like a more reasonable project than just finishing the other 17? But I started listening to them before COVID, and I feel like to go back, there would just be, in terms of listening to the first 33 lectures, thinking about where it did and didn't get me, going back, revisiting the same content, being, 2 years out later, it would help me reinforce the concepts. I bet I'm sure different things would sort of stick out to me as new. And I think I would struggle maybe with the remaining courses, having forgotten a lot of the sort of scaffolding that he builds in the earlier lectures. And all of the content in the middle stuff where he's really getting into kind of neuroscience and relevance realization and opponent, as we call it, kind of opponent processes, just thinking of, the waves going this way and that way. Again, like the opponent processes and the waves, there was something that just seems so like profound and useful about that to me when I had my manic episode back about, it was 2 years ago, like very much like 2 years ago. I think when April 2nd, I'm trying to think if I was in the Burr 4, like in the mental hospital exactly 2 years ago. It's about around the anniversary of that. Or maybe I could talk about that a bit more in another video. That time and my kind of memories of it. But yeah, with the Vervaeke lectures, there's I feel like I was struggling a little bit with the neuroscience content in terms of just not being able to, having a hard time focusing and following with some of it, while at the same time certain things are jumping up and seeming really profound. And I guess the content, I just sort of was letting it kind of wash over me. And I guess it's one thing to hear something and kind of in some like, let it wash over you and sort of seep into your skin a little bit and kind of get absorbed in your own kind of inner model understanding of things. But it can be, is it weak sauce? Isn't that an expression? And yeah, you pay attention and you maybe learn something or absorb something in a different way when you actually are like, okay, I need to replicate this for a test, or I need to be able to explain this to someone else. And which is sort of what a test is. But anyways, when was the last time I actually had to take a test? And when I was a student, I was a good student. I always wanted to do really well on tests, and I generally would. I would test well. But I was someone too who would require effort. I do not have a fantastic memory, and even as a student, I would have to study for my tests. I wasn't like you hear about, some people saying, oh, they would just sit and pay attention to the teacher in class and never really have to do homework or notes. They would just be able to glean enough from the teacher to be able to then ace the test with very little homework. And I would have a hard time actually paying attention as a student. I'd be maybe listening to, 30 to 40% of what was being said. Well, at the same time, having this sort of self-concept of being a good student. And then, I would do the studying and homework because it was very important and meaningful for me to do well and get good grades and demonstrate to others that I was smart, wanting to be the smartest. And I mean, obviously that's still with me now, but but yeah, that desire, there's other desires. Plus it's, I think when you're just sort of getting by in a more kind of normal kind of middle class space or zone, it's the name of the game is not to just go around trying to demonstrate to people how smart you are. But on the internet, in terms of maybe what I want to do, it is about wanting to be smart and demonstrate how smart I am to people one day. So if I'm being honest, that's an ambition. Although I would say I'm probably much more humble about what my impact, humble, using, less ambitious. So let's just say I'm maybe my ambitions have shifted, and to use that vessel language, I mean, part of it is just taking the stuff that I receive, the kind of notions and things that I observe and see and think I think are great, and then just wanting to kind of replicate and upregulate what to me strikes me as signal. And I don't, if I could maybe one day be like a genius at that, of just sort of maybe making certain connections and being able to point, like if I could maybe people be like, oh, she's really good at pointing to things that are good. Like if I maybe could just be known for having good taste in things. I guess what would I want? I would maybe like to be thought of somebody who has like good taste in things, and then is good and is maybe even kind of created or developed, or at least very good at somehow executing on mechanisms for expressing those pointers and just doing something, like to do something kind of creative in terms of just that pointing and recommendation and that signal up regulating. Let's see, in mycelium, sort of mycelium, or with other kind of biological metaphors, what would be the thing? It's like the nutrients. Maybe it's like identifying some process of kind of somehow identifying the nutrients. Like, oh, this is a nutrient. And then knowing something about being some part of the process for getting that nutrient to the part of the larger system that needs that nutrient. And I don't feel like I'm a teacher. I'm not like a natural teacher or lecturer. It's a teacher, somebody who is taking the nutrient and administering it to the student or the system. I don't know. Part of me is like, maybe when I thought about my little metaphor of whoever is actually kind of administering or like putting the nutrient in the thing, there's part of me I'm like, that's not me. Like, I just don't quite identify with that. Like, I can't quite identify with being like some kind of lecturer, teacher, instructor, course, developing a course, sort of learning, kind of overt learning environment leader. That's not me. Anyways, and of course I went to library school and studied to become a librarian and was a librarian, a development librarian for 5 years. So then, but in terms of that attraction of maybe wanting to be somebody who is able to build a library or innovate in the library realm, but not the library of books. I was always been kind of internet first over the printed word. And on the internet too, I'd say. I mean, I read a lot in the internet, but there's something too about audio. Like, I think in a way I'm almost like audio, like also kind of an audio first person when it comes to either writing, like listening to what people have written, maybe in audiobook form, or listening to conversations on podcasts. Anyway, yes, I've just gone from one thing to another. I've just sort of hopscotched to. Oh, hold on, let me. See, seems to be having fun. You can probably hear some of the noise off camera. With them, in terms of another ambition, maybe how I like in my how maybe I'd like to one day be thought of. Remember, the internet space. So maybe having good taste and being good at pointing to things, and maybe even being able to build good pointers. Oh, and movie theater. It's like that, pointing people, being good at getting the movies and putting them on the screen and pointing people to the movies. Sure. And having good taste in movies. So movie theater is also kind of like a mechanism for that process. But that's trafficking in film. And film is sort of great art. I know I'm going to be re-engaging with film more in the future, and that can be a thing in my toolkit. Baby June is tilting the chair. Oh, hold on. Okay. Anyways, back to sort of ambitions. I guess maybe also too when it comes to mediums. I remember before COVID in my internet citizen take one saga of 2018, early 2020, I was interested in mediums and medium magic and Marshall McLuhan and the medium is the message. That and thinking and looking at the affordance of different mediums, that's sort of been an interest and a theme of mine, and I've had all kinds of little creative ideas and ambitions. New paper, streams, everything on Nick streams. That felt like a new medium, and I guess grandiose thoughts about participating in the creation of a new medium or even a new internet. And then too with mediums, the idea of a medium being some conduit or channel between the world of the dead and the living. Our medium is sort of a just a psychic stuff and something to do with paranormal, supernatural, occult. And then there's that book, The Sympathetic Medium, which I bought, and I thought, I need to read this book and understand this book. And again, I don't have time to read any kind of books about history, but that one felt like, oh yes, this has something to do with me, and particularly the sort of feminine role of just imagining the telephone operator connecting people from one place to another, and history of sort of certain feminine role in the history of computing, and in communication technology history. Just feeling like there was some role that I could play. What else? Other online ambitions. Taste, mediums. But I can see now, of course, in terms of that kind of the Fool step, take one, step zero, I guess what one sort of daydreams are very kind of revealing. And I guess now that I'm kind of on step, that's fine, I'm just thinking about the tarot. I'm thinking about the magician, which is then number 2, and maybe you then get the sense of the kind of magic, or you get the sort of I'm thinking of that feeling of sort of being empowered in terms of seeing oh wait, I understand something of how the world works, and being a reality artist, and sort of period of empowerment. But then there is other things that happen along the way. Encounter the devil, the tower, or whatever. But anyways, there's that, and then just sort of dead ending. I guess right now, I can see now that I really, really want to be sort of selective in my projects and my kind of immediate short-term ambitions, and not, even just when it comes to like, if I realizing too, like if I want to maybe ultimately participate in building something or participate in building something or making something. Like, first of all, I know anything that I would want to be involved in building, like I'd want to be involved in it. I don't want to lead the way in any kind, lead the way or do like a solo project. I just know, kind of learned enough that I'm like, no, I don't want to try to build anything solo, and I don't think anything I ultimately would want to build could be a solo effort. And sometimes I guess I will go ahead and kind of do things, other kind of past projects. I'll have some inspiration. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and, such a great idea, it needs to be realized. I'm just going to do this solo. And with the movie theater, I've gotten better at sharing, delegating and sharing and not being too much of a control freak. But it has sort of been I felt a lot of sadness at times and felt really limited at times in terms of it just, being the sole owner and wishing that, I had like a business partner with that. Although now I have Steve, my husband, involved, and he handles tech stuff. There's that sense of sort of safety net or another person. But, within our marriage, there's still like the concept that's like Wendy's movie theater. Even if it's a family asset. But anyways, one thing I've learned is I think, I do, my mind, I'll think like, I want to make 100 of these videos, do 100 of these talking practices. And I'm like, actually, that seems doable. If the thing that actually makes that doable is if I am like restrained and being like, oh, I got to see this through. There's all kinds of, I got to practice, and I know that there'll be some mastery of something if I do 100 of these. But because this is about, has to do with stuff like insight and creation, I mean, maybe once I'm 50 through, there will be something that will seem more exciting or compelling that I'll get, I guess you could say, sucked into or whatever. And then I would kind of abandon this practice project. I guess I want to think more I want to think about not making mistakes of the past and think with like a longer view. I guess like doing just like practice and exercise. Like if right now it's just about practicing my own kind of like personal practices and little exercises. Just like get in shape. Mentally. Skills before actually kind of assuming any kind of responsibility. I guess that'd be the distinct thing, before actually kind of assuming any responsibility to like actually publish some kind of channel with any kind of audience, right? Whatever responsibilities come from like actually having an audience. Should I ever go in that direction? Assuming responsibility is both great, and I'm also, I guess, sometimes will be quick to assume responsibilities because I love power, and if I'm being honest, and I'm thinking now if I can just delay that and actually just sort of avoid assuming any kind of responsibility or making any commitment to anyone other than myself with this stuff, that could be good. Particularly because a lot of this is about this sort of career, I know if the creative path, a lot of it is really, it's about actually being able to be ruthless almost in pursuing your own sort of self-satisfaction. really like created. True artist is somebody who's like it's high on their own supply, and they really like they are the. In a way, I think of like the earliest artists I like, that they are like the main audience, you know, the greatest audience for what they're creating in a way, or they are, something where you are like really just driven to do it because you like get off on it. And this there's sort of this loop of pursuing your own self-satisfaction. Now, of course, all this it can get into very unhealthy, thinking about like unhealthy and unwholesome territory, and there's obviously I don't want to go to in terms of doing things that are like unwholesome. It'd be like slightly, just sort of. I'm just thinking of Venkatesh Rao, and if I pronounce that right, and a sort of concept of being slightly evil. I guess maybe I'd think of like being slightly unwholesome, but not crossing over. Like, I'm too old. I'm like too old and nearly middle-aged to, to really like think that satisfaction lies in being like more completely and fully unwholesome and reveling in that. And again, the family and I personally do not need to like go to the demon realm. Okay, I'm just laughing. Yeah. Concepts. Okay. Where was I? Yeah, in terms of ambitions and what I'd like to be known for. Smart. A lot of people thinking that I'm definitely like smart and self-aware. But at the same point, like self-awareness, you have to start from, I guess I think you have to start from a place of not being self-aware and again risking being cringe or whatever. And like the path to self-awareness involves walking the path of self-unawareness. I feel like this feels like this is good. I like that. There's something there. And then thought of, I don't need to be an astronaut, and I couldn't be an astronaut. But I just don't feel like telling that story right now, but I got a little story about that I think is a good one. But even space, I don't even really need to use space analogies. They're not for me, they're for other people. Like outer space, and moon and stuff. I mean, it's rich analogy stuff, but that's not, this is very phallic, as they say, but that's just not quite my domain, even though the sky has something, and the moon and stars and everything. It's got something to offer me, even the sun, but it's just not. Like when it comes to something maybe a bit more the sort of grand metaphors, I think that grand world scale metaphors, I think I'd want to kind of keep things confined, my kind of language and metaphor space confined to the earth largely. And I'm thinking a little bit about what I like about Alexander Bard's ecotopia concept and his feeling that like space travel, just sort of forget about it, or that should not be that assume that we only have one Earth and keep kind of treating one's frontiers there. But think that God bless the people who have their frontiers elsewhere. But yeah, magnetic, I think about the North Pole and the South Pole and magnetic fields, and what I learned not long ago about what the magnetic fields around the Earth actually being very kind of tortured, and there's like a war forces, like it's not just like there's the North Pole and the South Pole, but there's, they could flip, that there are magnetic field forces at war that are like shifting things. And just remember, there's one scientist and she just used the word tortured to describe it, and I thought that was great, and I want to learn more about that. But anyways, from the beginning and the end, like my grandest language just has to do with the North Pole and the South Pole, and something, the forces that like blanket or surround the Earth. That's great. That's good. Good. Draw, good boundary to draw. Constraint. Boy, it would be great to be able to read. Read a book. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something if I could choose a physical book and say, like, I'm going to read this. I am going to, like, conquer this book, and I'm going to read it from beginning to end. I'm going to have, like, a somewhat decent understanding from beginning to end of what this book is talking about. Similar, say, to that project, the Meaning Crisis lectures. Like, beginning to end, this is the challenge. This is the mountain I'm going to conquer. And it has been a long time since I have finished a physical book, reading a physical book that was not a children's book. I read a lot of kids' books in the last few years. I'll read many books sometimes in one sitting. And maybe I just feel such scarcity of attention for reading books too, that if a book, I start reading it and there's just something else catches my eye or attention, or I think something else might be just like a little bit more valuable for me to read, I'm just like, forget about it, drop it. Like, who cares? I can't push through with this book anymore. There's just something else I just have to focus on instead. But it would, if somehow I was able to kind of find the time or the room to read a book from beginning to end and prove to myself that I could do it, like running a marathon, that would really be something. It really would be. And I'm like, I can tell, like, I'm saying this now with this like slightly like joking tone of voice. And, the listener may think that I am like exaggerating a little bit, but I really feel like, say, like, just thinking of that like history book, that sympathetic medium one that I mentioned, I feel like kind of I've just felt like drawn to. I feel like if I were to read that book from beginning to end, that, like, in terms of a challenge, that would be about on par with me training to run a marathon. Half marathon. It's equivalent to me running a half marathon. And actually, in terms of me like getting in good jogging shape and like a few months of jogging a lot, like I think I've actually gotten close. So 13 kilometers I think would be like the longest jog that I ever went on. And I think it would have, if I'd kept going with it at that point, I kind of maybe would have been able to get up. Wait, it was 13. How many kilometers in a half marathon? Half marathon, I feel like it's within reach, and I don't need to run a marathon. It's fine. Yeah. This is a lot of fun. 44 minutes. Wow. This has been great. Baby June is looking at me right now and smiling. So I feel like I could just keep going, but I will wrap it up here. As to be continued. My 1 week adventure exploring states, and particularly also do this thread of me riffing on what I would like to be known or maybe one day recognized for, and kind of way or style of contributing, but my kind of feeling confidence that I could get there, but now just having this awareness that there's like a lot of practice and just, beginner's mind, no responsibility, like kindergarten, like this is kindergarten time. And, and the stakes, just keep the stakes, and responsibilities and consequences like low and minimal, and don't pursue the high of assuming responsibility for things. Yes. I'm just kind of caught up because I know, like, in terms of that, it's just like there's just something I feel like is sort of unsaid, or just listening to what I would want to be known for. It was pointing, being able to point to things, i.e. having good taste, innovating within the pointing space, medium, something to do with a medium or new mediums, and there's something I didn't mention it or get into it. I just feel like maybe there's something else for like this finger and this finger. Like there's space for two more things, and it just hasn't bubbled up, but it's like in there. Okay. Signing off.